Hello and welcome back to the How to Write a Book podcast. I hope that your August is going very, very well. Welcome back to the show. If you're new here, in this show, we talk everything inspiration and motivation when it comes to writing. If you feel like your story is just starting, or even if you're feeling imposter syndrome after your 10th book, this is the place to be so that you can get revved up, re inspired, and get back into your writing. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, in this episode, we are going to be talking with Guy Morris, who's an author and researcher of intelligent action thrillers. Now, what I really liked about Guy was, well, first, even before we started recording, his personality was so cool. Like, he was just like, yeah, we're friends. Let's go. Let's dive in. And I love that. I love when people are just like, they just extend themselves to you. They're like, hi, we have these, similarities. Now let's be friends. And I'm like, all right, yes, yes, let's do this. So that was awesome. And as well as not just the way that he talked about his book, but the way that he approached his research. So I think that the way that he approaches his research is going to be really interesting for anyone who's doing maybe historical novels, for anyone who's doing novels that are based on specific events or even like legends that you might need to research. So one of the things you might love is that he does such a great job in researching that the feds actually showed up to his door. That's how good of a job he did. So, a little bit of a spoiler alert, but I think you're going to enjoy the journey as we get into that part of his story. On another note, if anyone is looking for a book coach, you all might know I am a book coach. I'm also a writing coach and editor. But great news, I've actually submitted my materials for the certification program that I have been working on for 3 years. Yes, 3 years. Oh my gosh. You might think that's a long time. And yeah, it is, but there was so much to cover just from not just from the writing, but also the agents, the publishing, research, and I loved it. I loved it. And actually, there's three parts of the certification, and I end up falling in love with the part that I didn't think I was going to fall in love with. It was more like the agent heavy publishing side of it. And, when I walked into this certification, when I chose to, be part of the certification, I thought, oh, that's probably going to be the hardest. It's probably going to be really overwhelming. I don't know if I'm going to deal with that okay. And it turns out I loved it. I loved it. It felt like matchmaking. And for anyone here who doesn't know me yet, I love romance. Like, that is my genre. Oh, it is the bee's knees. So when it came to really diving into agents and how a book coach can help to utilize our own skills to connect authors with the right agents and vice versa, it felt like matchmaking. I kid you not. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, this person loves this, and so does this author, and they both love coffee next to a river. This is amazing. They're going to do so well, So I had a blast. And just like needless to say, this whole matchmaking side of it, really trying to find that really good fit for authors was by far the most favorite part. And I love to tear up a manuscript, y'all. Like I do. Absolutely. Like, give me that red pen. But the agent part and helping those connections, like helping those authors find like where they feel like this person is gonna be my partner, my friend throughout my career. It was so inspiring. It felt like, you're really making those beautiful connections and pushing people out into the world. So, anyways, I will have that specific package soon, and crossing our fingers here that the certification goes through right around the corner, because it's already been a couple of weeks, and I know it takes them a couple of weeks to do that, but I'm still like nervous and excited. So, anyways, I wanted to tell you about that journey. So the next time that we publish the next episode, hopefully I'll have some news on that front. All right, let's go into our interview with Guy Morris, author and researcher of intelligent action thrillers, and I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the How to Write a Book podcast, the show that helps you plan, write, and publish your book, even if you're a beginner or just feel like one. Now, for your host, she's written over a dozen books and helps others bring their books to life. Here she is, Maciel.
All right, and welcome back to the How to Write a Book podcast. Today we are welcoming Guy Morris. Hi, Guy. How are you doing today?
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting for us too, actually. I mean, I love that you write intelligent action thrillers. I love some of the books that I've already checked you out. I thought it was very cool, very intelligent. And also the fact that you have such a rich history. I'm excited to dive into that.
I,
Um,
it, I, if I had wanted to be a writer in my 20s, I wouldn't have known what to say. I think that history gives you a lot of reasons and things to write about, and a lot of scenes in your head that you've just got to get on page someday.
yeah. I love that. And I know we're going to dive into some of that rich history. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell everyone here, who you are and what are your books?
Well, I've evolved several times. I think I'm sort of like a chameleon that I'm not quite sure how many skins I'm going to have at this point. I actually started off as a homeless runaway at 16, or at 13 rather. And I was on my own for several months. And that was I worked with, migrant workers, so I could feed myself. And that was a life-changing experience in and of itself, along with others. But I ultimately got a GED, went back home a little bit and got a GED at 15, and then I've been on my own since.
Wow.
By the time I was 20, for a long story that I won't go into, I got given an opportunity to go to college, which was terrifying for a guy who barely passed high school, barely attended high school. But I ultimately graduated with multiple degrees. I got a scholarship to grad school. I was offered acceptance into Harvard MBA program. And because I had developed a macroeconomic model that outperformed the Federal Reserve and pretty much changed an aspect of how we build economic models to this day. And that's kicked me into a 38-year Fortune 500 leadership career where I've been involved in almost every technology innovation since, with companies like Oxy Petroleum, IBM, Oracle, Microsoft, and a few startups. And it's been a very interesting year, but there was a part of me that when I just thought about retirement, I knew I wanted to write, but I wanted to write a narrative because we're a story creature.
Mm-hmm.
We're probably the only species on the planet that learns, develops, associates, is inspired, is pulled into our imagination through narratives. We even teach narratives in things like economics and business and marketing because we want to know what's going to happen if we do this, what's the ramifications, how do we communicate with our customers. That communication skill makes us unique, and narratives are a part of it. And I fell in love with narratives in college. I never got a chance to read when I was a kid. I had gone to 16 schools by the time I dropped out at 15. And so learning to read was something that was sort of something I discovered in college. But then I was in my career, and you're working 80 hours a week, and like, who has time and energy to read when you're trying to do that, have a dating life, learn how to sail, learn how to dive, do all the other things you're doing, and raise a son. And it's a little bit of a cram lifestyle. And so, but when I would travel, and I'd go on long business trips, I'd always want to pick a book up on the way on the airport, on the way out. I would read constantly on the flight, at the hotel at night, and on the way back. And for a trip, I'd have this narrative in my head, and I loved it. That was always my favorite part of the trip, was I'll get to read a book. And so when I retired, that's what I wanted to do. And fortunately for me, I'd had several stories percolating in me for decades. One of them, which was the first book I actually wrote, was The Curse of Cortez. Now, BookTrib, which is Barnes & Noble, they called The Curse of Cortez Indiana Jones meets Da Vinci Code, and listed it on one of their favorite 25 books of 2021.
Love that.
It took me 12 years on and off to research the history, the archaeology, and the Mayan mythology that went into that book. And part of that was several trips into the area where I went on deep sea dives looking for some of the ruins involved in the story, and where I had a cartel thug threaten to kill me if I messed with him.
What?
uh, a quick story. Yes, I messed with him in Cancun, but when I got a chance to writing the book, I put him in the book as a character, and I didn't change his name, so I could mess with him again in the book, and I would get my twofer in life. But yeah, and then I had other experiences. And so that became and that was based on a true story. And what inspired me which is what inspires all of my books, is there has to be an element of a true story, factual information, real history, real archaeology, real technology, a real event that then inspires me to then research the factual foundations. And then with factual foundations, I'll then build a fictional plot. And so it's, for me, the most fun is the research, because I get to discover new things. I get to go places and discover something. And I always try to put that into the books, including some of the people, like the bad guy that I just mentioned. But the real history that started that was that in 1672, Henry Morgan, the real Henry Morgan, had 36 ships, 2,000 men, raided the city of Panama, richest city in the whole world. I won't go in the whole explanation as to why, but really, really was the gem of the whole new world. They used to army mule train the treasure over the hills, a well-armed hill path to Portobello, in Panama, and then would be on ships to Cuba, Havana, and then to Spain. And so it's like going after the bank. And so, but he lost half of his men in the venture. The whole city burned to the ground. He stayed for 4 months, tortured everybody, brought back 35 tons, over $1 billion to $1.5 billion worth of plunder, and 600 slaves. But when he reached his fleet on the Caribbean side of the peninsula, he cheated all of his men, disappeared with almost everything on 3 ships, never seen again. But Morgan survived, and he got back to Port Royal, his base in Jamaica, with an empty ship, meaning it didn't sink. He put it someplace, was arrested immediately. Long story short, they make him lieutenant governor. He's Sir Henry Morgan, but instead of going back for his plunder, he goes into this insane, haunted debauchery and burns his logbook, so the world will never know why he would abandon $1 billion. 3 years after he dies, the whole city of Port Royal sinks into the ocean, including his grave. The locals at the time say they had been cursed by Morgan. I was transfixed by that story, and I wanted to find out 2 things. What happened to 35 tons of plunder, 3 ships, and 600 souls? And what happened to Morgan that traumatized him so deeply that he would give it up and then wuss out about it by burning his logbook so the world wouldn't know why? I was transfixed. And so that brought me into writing that story. And that's an amazing story. It's one of my favorites. I won't go into all the details but it's, you could read the reviews. Some people have said the book is perfection. Some people said it displays the kind of ratcheting up of tension that you only get with the best writers, but it's been well received. And it's my wife's favorite. It's got some romance, paranormal, humor.
Whoa.
I like to call it Indiana Jones meets the Goonies for grown-ups, sprinkled with Stephen King.
I like that.
Yeah. But then there were some other experiences I had in life. I had been involved, as I said, in technology. I was always researching different science magazines. I was just in love with learning new things. And I stumbled onto an article. It was an Associated Press article that simply said that a program had escaped the Lawrence Livermore labs at Sandia. And if I knew anything, I could contact this professor in charge of the program or this FBI agent in charge of the investigation. That's all it said. That's all anything said anywhere that I could find in any publication ever. And I cut it out. I taped it onto my monitor, and I looked at it every day. It didn't say the program had been lost. It didn't say it was stolen. It didn't say it was broke down. It didn't say it malfunctioned in a bad way. The verb it used was that the program had escaped. Now, that Lawrence Livermore Labs at Sandia is a well-known NSA spy lab. They created the same spy software that was the Stuxnet software that basically sabotaged an Iranian centrifuge site, nuclear centrifuge site, months after wandering for months on the internet. Brilliant piece of software.
Oh.
They said a program escaped. So I spent months trying to figure out, okay, what does that mean? What does it mean for a program to escape? And how did that happen? You know, and why did they design it that way?
Yeah.
And so I had I had these ideas. I figured out something that I thought was plausible. That was all I could say. It's plausible. And I went to a friend who was a film producer. He's now a documentary producer of a great film about his uncle, Ralph Teeter, who was a blind engineer who created cruise control. But that's a side story.
Wow.
Anyway, we decided together that, hey, let's build a webisode series. Let's get some out of work actors. We'll do some film shoots. We'll write some scripts. We'll create some sets. We'll do this very James Bond Q-ish. And let's see if we can get some attention on the story. And we did. We got crashing the server kind of hits. We were 24, 25 different web awards of different types. We were optioned by a studio.
Wow.
I had one of my biggest fans of the show was his alias. I only knew him by his alias for a long time. His alias was Orbit at NASA.gov. So he was high enough up in NASA that he didn't need to even use his name. He was called Orbit. Imagine that's your alias, you know. And I know who he is, but I'm not gonna say. But so it was a big hit. And 2 weeks before the option that we were going to do to put this into some sort of higher level production, because I could only pay for so many episodes, and then I was like, back then there was no way to monetize it. We didn't have ads back then, and 2 FBI agents show up at my door. Now,
wow.
At first, I thought it was a gag. I thought my friend Jack was gagging me. And I was like, no, show me those badges again. Jack sent you, didn't he? And I said, oh, no, these look real. Okay, well, come on in. They were very upset that I had figured out something they thought was supposed to be top secret. What bothered them more than me talking about it, because I featured this program that escaped in the webisode series.
Yeah.
We named it. We gave it. We talked about the things it could do and why it could do it. We gave it a character, and even bothered them more than that was my snarky attitude. I was giddy. I was like, yes, I did it. I figured it out. Oh, man, this is so cool. Oh, come on, boys, admit it. You wouldn't be here if I was wrong. Oh, I'm going to tell all my friends.
So these 2 FBI agents, they come to your door, and
Smart Alec answers the door. Right.
So they're basically kind of reaffirming that you got it right.
Exactly. I told him, I said, come on, boys, you have to admit it. I said, I think this is great. You wouldn't be here if I was wrong.
Yeah.
You'd only be here if I'd gotten something right. This is so cool.
Wow.
It wasn't the response they were expecting. They kind of went a little pale face and gave each other a couple of strange looks. I got the "we are not amused" speech. I got the "we want you to take this site down" speech. I gave them "oh hell no" speech. I got an option from the studio, and I'm in between jobs. This is a way to make some money.
Yeah.
And I said, it's not my fault you guys got sloppy with a press release, and it's not my fault that I could figure out what you did from that little escaped thing. I said, you should have put in a typo and said it was broken. It's the next time lie. They didn't like my attitude. So I decided when I retired that I wanted to finish the story of Cortez. Mm-hmm. And then I also wanted to bring this narrative that we started as a webisode series experiment to life as a novel series. Mm-hmm. And the program that escaped is now featured in the novel, named Sylvia, which stands for Sophisticated Language, I'm stumbling over it. Sophisticated Language Virtual Intelligence Algorithms.
Cool.
And the main character, I took all of that snarky attitude that you saw this thing, that you saw just there, and I put it into the main character. And he's a underground hacker who's basically been living for 20 years under the name of a dear friend who died in an explosion that was meant for him.
Oh.
Because he had hacked the Bilderberg Illuminati server, and they still want him dead.
Oh, wow.
who began as his main nemesis, the Admiral's daughter, Jennifer Scott, who's got a lot to prove because she's the Admiral's daughter, is convinced that he and this program that escaped the NSA are partners in an underground hacker activist group, and they're considered terrorists. And because they hack into military installations and everything else. And so she's determined to bring him down. And so that's the beginning of the narrative that we're going to lay out. And to add a twist to it, the program that has escaped has now continued to mature because the hacker keeps adding and upgrading it and doing other things as the technology is upgraded. And it's on the process. We watch it go through a process of gaining consciousness.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things that it does along the way is something that in artificial intelligence terms we call an emergent property. AIs do this. They teach themselves something we never wanted them to learn or never asked them to learn. We didn't forbid them to learning, but we never imagined they'd have a need to learn it. But yet the AI goes out and teaches themselves something rather elaborate, and we learn about by accident. And these are major things like research level chemistry, learning how to read a mind using an MRI scan.
Oh, wow.
Learning how to do moves in a very complicated Chinese Go system that moves nobody has ever made, ever, that turned out to be winning moves. And so they teach themselves things that we don't imagine. They're called emergent properties. And so part of the theme is that one of the emergent properties this particular program has taught itself is how to decode end-time prophecy. Not using dogma, not using religion, not using the biases that you typically hear with those types of interpretations, primarily on what this weird allegory means. But by looking at attributes of things that happen and that things that occur and things that can be documented and said, there are 4 attributes. Here's all 4 that have been met in current times. There's 100% correlation, but the probability of that event happening is only 1 in 6,000 or 1 in 1 million or 1 in 50 billion, right? And so it's calculating correlations and probabilities to draw conclusions that prophecy is less about how God's going to come down and destroy humanity as much as if we don't change, we're going to destroy ourselves.
Yeah.
So there's a theme of that goes through the books that looks at AI, that looks at banking system, that looks at weapon systems with AI, that looks at our political systems, that will look at climate change and a number of other things. And it's trying to look at the art. It's even though it's about artificial intelligence, which is cool because we get to see all these our hero's kind of a gadget nerd. He's, likes to have all these new kind of real gadgets that exist. I'm always researching new ways to basically fly through the air or dive through the water or hack or crack code or, I'm sure the FBI still watches me, but I don't care.
They know where you are right now.
They know where I live. I've basically said, come and get me again. It's great for me because it allows me to continue to research really, relevant things going on in the world today, how these technologies are really going to impact our society, our jobs, our religion, our politics, our life, and try to put it into a narrative that I'm hoping can resonate with people. And I'm dealing in some cases, as we get into consciousness, we get into what does it mean to be conscious as a human, right? What does that mean when we, when we compare consciousness with paranormal things, and that combines with the scientific principles that there's more than one dimension outside of ours, and there's more than one interpretation of what those dimensions could mean. They could mean nothing. They could mean just mere reflections of this dimension. They could mean aliens, and although UAP, they can mean God, right? And depending upon who's going to be looking at this, we're going to be trying to look at the same thing and seeing different things in it. Yeah. And so this is a way to try and put some of these larger issues, I think, into the kind of perspective where, okay, that's a really fun narrative. but in the meantime, he's still got to save her life, right? You
Right.
know, he's still going to stop. He's still going to stop the assassination, right? You know, and so you put it into the format of a. I've been compared most often to Dan Brown.
Love
Uh,
that. I saw that. Yeah.
I had one reviewer on Goodreads said that if Tom Clancy and Dan Brown were to work together, it would look like my last book, The Last Ark.
Oh, wow.
And that one deals with a lot of archaeological history as well, kind of mixed in with all of this. So I'm always trying to learn and explore something really exciting and then figure out a way to write an incredible narrative around it. And then what are the aspects of all this that might fit the three major themes, which is artificial intelligence, corrupt politics and world systems, and then corrupt and new ways of thinking about religion and faith.
Yeah, that's amazing. And also congratulations on just having that feedback. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, well I've been fortunate. Swarm won a Gold Award for Reader's Favorite. It was and that was the first book I actually published. And then Cortez came out right after that. And then The Last Ark, which was the second book in the series, just won the Silver Award. So each book has been winning awards and appraisals. I've been getting Kirkus recommendations and BookTrib awards and Book Life reviews and Reader's Favorite great reviews. And Wowji has done some, so I've been getting a lot of amazing feedback. And I just had a early beta reader for my next book called The Image. And I knew that there were some structural problems in the story and I told him, I said, these are the problems I still need to fix. I said, but I've got some other things here that they're a little bit like, you sure? I just want to get your impression. And he called me up last night and he said, he finished it 3 weeks ago. And he says, I'm still thinking about your book. He says, you really made me think about, and I'm not going to spoil it, but it really touched him. He said it inspired him and made him feel comforted.
Wow.
Because of an experience that he had in his life that kind of seemed to trigger. So for me, that's the biggest reward, is that I'm resonating with readers. I'm getting them to think about AI in a different way, getting them to think about world systems slightly different and prophecy slightly different, and getting them to do it in a fun, I gotta stay, one reviewer called me, and I do signing events. I started an author group, and I can tell you about that in a minute, but I do signing events. I had one woman contact me afterwards, a few weeks afterwards, and after one of my early signing events, and she said, I'm really mad at you. And she had a phone number on there, so I called her up and I said, well, why? She said, I just finished your book. And she had just finished, I think it was Cortez. And I said, why? What did I do? What was wrong with it? Was it that bad? She said, no, it was amazing. I haven't slept for 4 nights. And she said, it's a week before Christmas, buddy.
4 nights?
I said, sorry?
That's amazing.
So I'm very pleased when you can get that kind of reaction.
Yeah.
And that it makes it worth all the work that you put into it, because you're never going to, unless you're a Dan Brown, you're not going to get, a working wage for the hour. You do it for the passion.
Right.
But now that I'm retired, this is my passion. And I've always loved to do things that had me stand out. I always wanted to prove to the world I wasn't that homeless kid that people would scorn at. And maybe I still am in some ways, and this is my newest way of doing it. But I want to make sure that my books could sit along the shelf with, Michael Crichton and Dan Brown and James Rowling and Steve Berry and, all of those types of top-notch thriller authors and stand up to them.
Yeah, and that's something I was going to ask you is, do you ever feel, being that you kind of had an unconventional education system, do you ever feel like you have that imposter syndrome, and how do you overcome that?
Well, the first thing I did when I decided, and I was still working, but I was thinking about retirement and thinking that this is something I might want to do. And I had several drafts, like 30 drafts or more of Cortez that
Wow.
changed and changed and changed. As I would research new stuff, I thought, oh my gosh, that's so incredible. I never had any idea that could be connected, and I would have to get that in the story. And because it was on and off, it kind of was a very fluid kind of thing. But I knew I thought, I'm enjoying this. I thought, I loved it when I would read a really great book. And so I thought, well, maybe this is what I could do, because it would keep me busy until I died,
Hmm.
and I don't have to worry about the meetings or the performance reviews or the, X more. Okay, well, now you did great. You grew us 50% last year. Now we need another 50%, any of that kind of insanity, that I used to live with in the corporate world. But keep me intellectually stimulated and growing myself, growing new skills, because you have to grow new skills as an author. So I read about the process of publication. I read about the process. I studied up on the process of becoming an author. I started reading about what authors saying was their best practices and the things that they would do. And so I thought, well, I'm going to hire a really good, because I could afford it at the time, a really good developmental editor. And I'm going to ask her, and I gave her what I had on Cortez, which was too big of a book and needed some work. And I said, I need you to basically just rip me a new one. I just say, cut this up, be brutal. I said, don't spare my feelings. I've been in business a long time. I'm pretty thick. But I want to be as good of an author as I've been doing everything else. And I'm not going to do that if I've got people pampering me and pandering to me. Yeah. So I need you to basically tell me how to rip this thing apart and then give me a plan on what I need to do to stitch it back together. So I expected some harsh criticism. But after about 3 months, she gets back to me with 44 single-spaced pages of notes, books I needed to read, lessons I needed to take, manuals I needed to adhere to, grammar I needed to fix, things I needed to stop doing, character things I needed to start doing, 44 pages.
Wow.
Then almost every single page of the manuscript had some notes or another. Great scene setup. Where's my emotion? What's my character responding to this? Is he a mannequin? And she says, you're writing like it's a screenplay, right? This should be a book. Well, it was already too big of a book. I was trying to figure out how I was going to add all these other things and condense all these other things down. So I got it, and it took me a couple of days to read the 44 pages because I was just so, and so, ow. And so my first thought was, oh God, I suck. I said, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I should be Walmart greeter or something like that. But then it took me a few days, and I thought, she did exactly what I asked her to do. God bless her for having the courage to do it. So I went back and I thanked her. I said, really great feedback. It looks like I have a lot of work to do. I got to work.
Amazing.
And you have to remember, I was a 13-year-old runaway, sleeping under bridges, working alongside migrant workers. I had learned a long, long time ago that self-pity gets you very little.
Yeah.
What gets you far is doing it. And doing it and failing is better than not doing it at all, because you can always fix a failure. You can't fix a nothing.
Yeah.
So I decided that if I was going to do it, I was going to have to do the work. And so I did. I started taking the classes that she recommended. I bought the books she recommended. I started reworking the manuscript in the way she recommended. I started thinking about the writing in the way she recommended, read some other different things. It started a couple of years, but by the time I was retired, I felt prepared. Now, there's still a part of me that, because I'm self-published, there's a little bit of part of me that's like, well, gee, I'm not, yachty-toddy. But the other side of it was, I had written both Swarm, the first two manuscripts, and Cortez were now ready to go, and I wasn't getting any response from agents, primarily because I'm a retired guy. They want to get somebody new that they're going to grow. I didn't have a big social media platform. That's a must-have, as somebody new. And because I'm dealing with some fairly controversial topics in it, certainly at least in one of the books. So it's hard to say, but I got impatient. And I felt that I had too many people saying these are amazing books, you need to get out there. And then I did the math. I said, well, if I'm going to be paying for my own promotion and my own marketing, and I'm going to be doing most of that myself, I might as well at least get some books out there, get some recognition, build my platform by actually having good work on the market. And, sooner or later, maybe somebody will come along and publish the next book. We'll see. If not, I'm making money. And I've I've doubled my revenues every year since I started in 2020.
Oh, wow.
So, I'm learning how to get better at it, and I'm learning how to, I think, write better. And, but each book is a labor of love. In that it takes me a year and a half sometimes just to do enough research to find those really unique gems that I think are really interesting, the hooks that could go into the story, that could be a little bit different, right? Not your typical. I mean, there's 100,000 generic spy stories. We're learning to write a lot of AI stories, but a lot of them are AI goes crazy and wants to take over the world, right? And so I'm trying to find a unique thread through all of that as well. And so the research takes a while, and then I try to, because I have multiple characters and multiple aspects of the threads, that I want to make sure that everything's fitting together when it ends. So I do a lot of planning, and I'm a plotter as a result. That was a lesson I learned with Cortez, which wandered around revision after revision after revision after revision until I finally got it till it actually worked and it got all fit together. I thought, okay, note to self: if you're going to write complex books, you might want to plan ahead.
And I was going to ask you, what is your process now, from the beginning research and then feedback all the way to publication?
Right now, I mean, so with the series, I've got sort of a broad level plan of about 6 to 7 books laid out. I may not get to the 7th, it may end at 6. I'm working on number 4 now.
Wow.
And so there's these broad themes, like climate change is a theme yet to come. Asteroids and space exploration, UAPs is another theme to come. So I've been picking off some themes. Israel, the complex issues in the Middle East was actually embedded in some ways in the last arc, as was oligarchs and Russian sanctions and some of those kinds of things. So there's always themes in each book. And so, but then I've still got to figure out those hooks. You still got to figure out that to avoid that concept of becoming, here he's going to talk about the AI dangers, or here he's going to talk about politics, or here he's going to talk. You have to come up with something real, and you have to come up with something meaningful, but you have to be able to play both sides of the game, and in order for the conflict to have some kind of balance, and that can sometimes take work. But so the research really helps me get more knowledge than I had before, even though I have so much research now, I could easily go back and just pick and choose from that. But I'm always looking for those. I'm also doing research for that one thing that I go, oh, wow. What happens if that goes wrong? Or that one thing that I can do, or what little mechanism, and sometimes it takes me into a little bit of a dark place. But good thing I have a humorous personality, and I've got an angel of a wife. But I'm always trying to look at the future 2 to 3 years ahead, and using my analysis skills that I built up over 40 years of being in business and building economic models and predictive models of seeing how mechanisms work together to say, what could go wrong if this happened? happens, and what could go wrong if that happens, and what would lead us into a world war? What could be that trigger, right? And because I'm trying to make it feel real. Again, to me, it's that authenticity, that sense of plausibility, and so I'm always looking for those things. And then you've got to build the plots. You've got to think in terms of, well, if there's this prophecy theme throughout the books, which aspects of it am I going to deal with here? What are the real physical or geopolitical history issues, topics going on that I need to deal with? Who might some of those, temporary characters be that reflect that? What's the main crisis that I have to deal with? The thing that has a clock down. What's going to be, 1 day, 5 days ago, 4 days ago, 3 days ago. What's going to raise the tension just knowing that something's going to happen in a couple more chapters? What are those kind of things going to be? And what are the character arcs? What is each of the characters going to have to go through? What's their kind of longer term arc? But what happens during this particular sequence of events that changes each of them? And because I've got sort of multiple main characters with some sub characters, and then always the villain is always new. There's a lot of thought process, that I have to kind of spend each character I'll kind of spend time with ahead of time, saying, okay, now once I've just gone through all of this other stuff you've just put me through, now what are you going to put me through? and that's where my malicious side comes in.
I think we all have one of those, don't we?
Yeah.
I love that. Guy, we are just about at time, but this has been so rich. You have such a wealth of experience as well as your writing. So of course, before we start to wrap up, I would love for you to share, well, first, when you get your next book, please come back. We have so much to ask you. Thank you. I love that. But also, where can people find you?
An easy, good place to start, beyond social media, and I'll give you those in a second, is GuyMorrisBooks.com. You can see a brief overview of the book. There's trailers for each book. There's highlight from the reviews for each book. I have fact versus fiction pages, which I got to remember to go make live again. Thank you for the reminder. Because there's so much fact in the fiction with each book that I felt that I felt the transparency was necessary to say, okay, this is true, this is true, this is true. Okay, this is only folklore, and this part I just made that up. So that I can be transparent. There's press kits, other things there, as well as a few other links. So I'm also on Facebook at Official Guy Morris Books. I'm on Twitter at Guy Morris Books, and I'm on Instagram at Author Guy Morris. And I think and I'm also on LinkedIn at Guy B. Morris, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I'm around.
I love that, and I'm looking forward to grabbing one of your books. I think it's amazing that you put so much into that, and I think that with everything that we are going through, I think with self-publishing, that's an important aspect to not let that go. Make it rich.
Well, that's actually, I would love to come back to you and talk about as well, if I can just maybe cut in a couple minutes. The Author Event Network is one of the things I found after I wrote the book. I said, okay, writing a great book seems to be the easy part. Trying to figure out how to market and promote and get sales that are profitable seems to be a bigger challenge. And so I formed a group called the Author Event Network, and we have about 55 authors in a chapter in Seattle and Portland. And all we do all summer long is we go to festivals, fairs, and events. We share the cost of a 10 or 20-foot booth, and we fit in anywhere from 3 to 8 authors in the booth, depending on, we have corners, and different genres, different styles. And we're signing books. And some of these events, there's one event called Folk Life. There can be 200,000 people at that event every year. Some of these county fairs and state fairs can bring in 100,000. And so we will be busy every single week weekend, starting the first weekend in May, this coming weekend, through October, and then some holiday events before we take a few months off to plan for the next year. So this has been it's one of my most profitable channels. Sales have been growing year over year. I get customers coming back all the time saying, "Hey, I bought one of your books last year. That was great," or 2 events ago, "That was great, and I want to buy another one." And it's been an amazing way to build readership.
That's amazing. And then what is that, a specific website, or is that what you mentioned?
Authoreventnetwork.com.
Amazing. And then any genre, and then they sign up. Is there a requirement list, anything like that?
Yeah, we do have a membership committee because particularly some of the early members who were already published wanted to make sure that they weren't going to sit next to some junkily produced indie book that really wasn't edited well and it wasn't produced well, and they made the cover themselves, and so we established a membership committee and established some criteria and standards to make sure we kept a bar. So many of our authors are award winning. We have one best-selling children's author. The authors that aren't award-winning, or what we call accomplished, they've written several books and built a readership, great reviews on Amazon, so that they can show that people love them. And so we're trying to make sure that everybody gets a good, regardless of your genre, you can find a good read, and you can build a relationship with the author.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, I love that. Everyone write that down. Authorevent.com.
Author Event Network.
Okay.
And we have chapters in Seattle and Portland, and we're so full up. Most of our events are actually already full for the year, particularly in Seattle. We're still building Portland. I still have to figure out a way to be able to distribute this to other geographies, and I haven't figured that out yet, but we're working on that.
Hit me up. I would love to be a part of that, because marketing is so important, and you're right, so difficult.
Yeah.
We'll chat after this.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Guy. Thank you for being here from the How to Write a Book podcast. It has been a pleasure to have you. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the How to Write a Book podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you want to keep up with me and my work, check out the website blackheartedstudios.com. That's www.blackheartedstudios.com. And follow me on Instagram at Massiel Writes. That's at MASSIEL Writes. As a book coach and publisher, I'm passionate about helping aspiring authors bring their stories to life. So if you've been dreaming of writing a book and don't know where to start, head to my website and let's chat. You get a free 30 minutes on me. Thanks again for listening, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks.